We're going to start this week with a really interesting matchup. We have got two fairly poor defenses that are maybe starting to turn it around over the last few weeks. We've certainly seen flashes. Tom, do you think that these two defenses could potentially put the brakes on what looks like on paper a really intriguing matchup?
No, I don't. I think obviously Jalen Ramsey coming back for the Dolphins is big, and he's looked fantastic. But the Dolphins also lost Jalen Phillips last week, and I think when you look at the Commanders' defense, any kind of stats that you look at them for on the season, inflated by the fact that a few weeks ago they had two good pass rushers, and now they don't. And whether they believe in the guys behind them or not, I think we all know they're a step down from the two that they did have. So for me, this comes down to, can Washington's fast-paced offense keep up with Miami's kind of like guns blazing offense, really? We talk about what both these teams like to do, and it is the Commanders want to drop back and pass a lot. They pass at a very high rate and they play quickly. The Dolphins, they play efficiently, they score a lot of points, and it just becomes very difficult to see the Commanders having a leg up in this one because their defense is so atrocious, particularly against the pass. They rank 32nd in pass defense DVOA. Against wide receiver ones, they rank 30th, wide receiver twos, 24th, and there isn't a positive matchup for them. Tyreek Hill, it really seems like the Dolphins want to get him these 2,000 yards, and he's on the cusp of it. He's on track. All he has to keep doing is having big games. The Commanders, they've allowed 12 different wide receivers to score 17 plus points against them. So I think even though in DFS, even though Tyreek is very expensive this week, it's hard to look past him, particularly when we've got cheap players who we're going to get to tonight. And you just look at what they've struggled against, and it is what Tyreek does. I think Jalen Waddle's a fine play. I think Raheem Mostert will be a fine play if Devon Achane misses out. I'm not sure. I haven't seen the latest on that, but Mostert's a 20 plus
today.
Okay. Well, Mostert's had 20 plus touches in back to back games. They're leaning on him like in a way you just don't expect a 31-year-old running back to be leaned upon. Jeff Wilson, he's barely been a factor. Like it felt like against the Jets, they tried to get him going a bit. He had his first 10-point game of the season, but it just doesn't seem to be clicking for him in the same way it did last year. And on the Commanders side, Antonio Gibson came back, and Brian Robinson pretty much immediately lost that pass catching role, which had made him like a top sort of 10 running back. When he has that and Gibson's not playing, he is incredibly valuable. And against this Miami team where, they rank 21st against the run, if the Commanders can keep it close, perhaps Brian Robinson can stay in the game, but I'm not feeling overly optimistic. The two players on the Commanders side that I'd be most leaning towards, though, in DFS lineups would be Curtis Samuel. The Dolphins allow the 8th most fantasy points to slot receivers. Samuel, he plays in the slot 73% of the time, as well as Logan Thomas. The Dolphins struggle against tight ends. They rank 26th there. And really, if you're playing DFS, you can stack this in whatever way you can. If you're playing it in redraft dynasty, I think, it's pretty obvious for this one. With an over-under of 50 points is a game where you want to start as many players as possible.
Yeah, certainly one to be attacking in those DFS lineups. I'm intrigued with the Achane, Tom. I want to pick your brains on this slightly. 6 weeks ago, he was the hottest thing in fantasy circles, in dynasty circles. He was being talked about as a top 3 dynasty running back. The last few weeks, we've obviously had the stint on IR. He's then come back and sort of never got going. It feels like his value has absolutely plummeted. So I'm wondering if there's a sneaky little buy window. If you believe in the talent, if you believe that this guy, he's not going to be 26 points a game, but if he could be explosive on a limited amount of touches, I still think he's a top 12 dynasty running back. I don't think you have to pay those prices. So I do wonder if you can potentially go and get a mid to late first to go and buy Achane right now. Is that something you'd potentially be interested in doing?
I really struggle with this one because I wanted to be very high on Achane this year, but what we've seen is kind of a book on him. He's that small running back who can't stay healthy, and since week 5, he's got 2 touches for 5 yards. So even though what he did between weeks 3 and 5 was insane, and truly insane, like over 100 yards in every game, like just dominating on very few touches. In Dynasty, I'm kind of thinking, okay, well, what does it look like next year? Yes, Raheem Mostert would be going in the age 32 season. Yes, Jeff Wilson be going in like age 29 or age 30 season. But the Dolphins, I mean, they're probably going to add another back. I don't think that we've seen enough where we could say Devon Achane could ever be a 3-down workhorse, even if he's got that kind of skill set. So for me, I think I'd possibly hold off on it.
Yeah, I kind of get that argument. I think it depends on the price. If you can get him for probably less than a mid-first, I'm all in. I think if you're having to pay up to go and get him, you're not really buying low. You're paying at appropriate price. And I think that's it. If you can get a buy low, I'd be really intrigued. But we've got a few people in the chat, a few of our members. Evening. Thanks for joining us. But interesting question here from Lewis. This is probably more a question for you, Tom, with your best ball head on. He's saying, do you guys think this is the year where we've seen the highest impact from undrafted or late round players in terms of, he said, Mostert, Achane, Kyron Williams, Puka Nacua, Tank Dell, Zach Moss, guys that went undrafted in a lot of best ball drafts?
Well, yeah, but the big part there is that just won't really impact best ball in as big a way as we think, because particularly if you're talking about underdog in 18 rounds, a bunch of those guys weren't drafted very often at all. On Draftkings, I've got 5% Kyron, 5% Puka, and I know that's actually quite a decent amount compared to most people. So I think they are having a big impact, but you look back last year, Geno Smith had a huge impact on the quarterback position, which is an easier position to make a big difference to. Sometimes we see guys at the tight end position have really big difference-making seasons. There, at the running back and wide receiver position, I think, these kind of big spike weeks, if Devon Achane had got hot in the playoffs and delivered 22 touches for 233 and 4 touchdowns, that would be something that would be very hard to overcome for other teams. But generally, yeah, I think in 20-round best ball, it probably suggests that we should be taking more shots and spreading exposure about every single year and trying to hit on those. On 18-round best ball, I think it's probably not going to make as much big of impact as we kind of think it might do.
Yeah, I think we see this pretty much every year. I think we just kind of forget about it. I think, you look at the likes of Tony Pollard, Jamal Williams. Okay, they weren't undrafted, but they were phenomenal values. I mean, Zay Jones was a wide receiver 2 last year. He was undrafted. I think Curtis Samuel was a wide receiver 3. Christian Watson the same. I think we see it almost every year with similar types of players. We just almost have that kind of short-term memory and forget about who it is that did it the year before and just think this year's the year it's happened more than ever before kind of thing.
Yeah, and we'll talk about it in January, maybe February time when we look back at the ADP and compare it. But the important thing to remember is how many players are absolutely stinking up who were similar picks. It wasn't too long ago where the conversation was, which Giants receiver do you need? Do you need Jalen Hyatt or do you need Paris Campbell? Well, you didn't need either of them. You didn't even need Wan'Dale Robinson, who also went undrafted. You needed none of them, and that kind of applies to a bunch of teams and a bunch of players, sadly.
Yeah, it's a tire fire for some of us, Jets fans, Giants fans. There's a few offenses out there that you don't want any part of. But if you want to get your question answered, if you want to start a conversation, get those questions in below. We're going to be here all night answering 100% of your questions. Get them in. We'll answer them. We'll chat it through.